It is Thursday, 6:21. Michael Cohen, thank you for taking the time to join us. It's a story now that's captivating and horrifying the country. This 9-year-old girl in Arizona accidentally shooting an instructor with an Uzi. And some are asking, what's a 9-year-old doing shooting an Uzi? Well, Edwin Walker is the program attorney at U.S. Law Shield. USLawShield.com is the website. He's here to chat a little bit about this. Edwin, thank you for taking the time this evening.
Well, thank you for having me on your show.
Now, you're with U.S. Law Shield. You guys essentially provide legal support for those that may have been involved in a shooting incident?
Yeah, U.S. Law Shield and Texas Law Shield are legal services companies whereby it has a membership, it's membership-based, and in the event that one of the U.S. Law Shield or Texas Law Shield members gets involved in an incident where they have to use their gun to defend themselves, someone else, or their property, then they have basically all their legal representation paid for by virtue of their membership fee.
Now, when you were going to law school, did you ever envision you'd be working in this capacity?
Well, I tell you what, I've been a lawyer for over 20 years, and the law is such an exciting field that you never know what kind of permutation it's going to take.
Were you a Second Amendment advocate then before you were a lawyer? Or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. My own political beliefs have always bended towards the libertarianism, and so I've always been a fervent supporter of all of the Bill of Rights, First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Second Amendment. Yes, and that's why, the majority of my practice is criminal defense, where we actually get to go into court and litigate constitutional rights, such as your right against unreasonable searches and seizures, and your right against self-incrimination, things like that.
We certainly have the right to use firearms, but some are asking, especially on the gun control side, they're saying, what in the world is a 9-year-old girl doing shooting a fully automatic Uzi? What is your view on that?
Well, there's no legal restrictions about how young you have to be to fire a weapon. The only legal restrictions pretty much in most state laws is that it has to be under the supervision of an adult. And clearly, she didn't. Pretty much all states have laws against the access of minors to weapons, but the major exception of that is that it's okay whenever it's done in the presence of their parents or an otherwise competent adult. And
do you think a 9-year-old should be firing an Uzi this way?
Well, the thing is, I don't think that there needs to be an arbitrary age on it, because obviously children and people in general and children specifically have different rates of maturity and different rates of progression and what they can do. And so I think it would be wrong to have something arbitrary to say that you cannot. The folks that say, well, a child under 9 should never touch a firearm. Well, that's just too, like I said, that just seems too arbitrary and too black and white. Whereas you are.
What's the benefit, though? What is the benefit in your mind of a child 8, 9 years old using a firearm?
Well, first of all, to teach them not to be afraid of the firearm, to teach them primarily safety issues. You never point a gun at another person. You always assume that a gun is loaded, that sort of thing. And so the minute that the earlier you start teaching a child that a firearm is something to be respected and something to be handled in a safe manner, then I think you greatly cut down on the potential that the child will later on, or even when they grow up to be a teenager or an adult, will handle that firearm in a reckless manner. Now, obviously, I think the firearms that children are given to handle should be appropriate for their age. Start with a .22, start with a single action, maybe a bolt action. And so that's the thing that's curious here, is that I know that the 9-year-old was from what I've read, she's from New York. The parents were on vacation.
Yeah, it was called, I think, there was a thing where you eat a burger and you get to go to the firing range, that kind of thing. There apparently are even grenade launchers you can play with there.
Right.
Should there be restrictions on some of the weapons that the kids have access to, or should that not really even be on the table?
Well, under the law, a firearm is a firearm, and there's restrictions on your ownership of them. However, when it comes to possession and shooting, there's no restrictions, and since all of this possession and shooting is done in the confines of a legitimate firing range, I don't know that there should be any restriction on it. Obviously, to a lot of people, that's the only time they'll ever get to shoot a fully automatic weapon is when they go to a gun range, because they either can't afford them because they're very expensive because of the 1986 post machine gun ban.
When you're shooting off 800 bullets, that can get pricey too. I'm talking to
yes.
I'm talking to Edwin Walker, a program attorney at U.S. Law Shield. Do you have kids of your own, Edwin?
No, I do not.
Okay. Now, in terms of this, the incident itself, do you see this kind of leading to any discussion or changes on the national level, or is this just going to go away?
I don't know. I think that it'll probably go away in that all states have laws regarding children's possession of firearms. All states say that it's illegal for a child on their own to possess a firearm, to get a hold of a firearm, it's criminal to make a firearm available to a child unless it's done under the supervision of a person. This was not, this was a trained instructor. Obviously, this place is going to have to look at its own policies. There are ranges that don't let children have firearms, and that's their own policy, and I think everybody should have the right to make their own policy. Something that probably will come about in these private policies is that, this Uzi, if it was capable of select fire, then it should have only been loaded with 3 or 5 rounds, something where it could have provided the sensation that the people who are shooting it sought to have. But
right, I heard another gun owner of one of these ranges saying that they do allow the same thing, but in their case they actually hold the weapon, simply let the child pull the trigger. So
absolutely, there's a number of different ways that this accident could have been prevented, which don't result in just a blanket arbitrary ban of saying no person under the age of X should be allowed to ever touch a gun, because I think that does a disservice. It does a disservice to the firearms training community, and ultimately it could do a disservice to the public at large if you create this group of children who then grow up and now are either afraid to handle firearms or they simply were not taught the safe way to handle firearms and respect firearms.
Why would not being exposed to a gun make you afraid of it, though?
Well, I guess you'd have to ask somebody who was afraid of it. But I know that there's a lot of people who are afraid of guns. I have seen anecdotally that if you question most of the anti-gun folks, they have no personal acquaintance with any firearms whatsoever.
They've never used a gun. When was the first time you used a gun yourself?
I was under the age of 10. It was with my dad, and we went out into the woods, and we shot at things, branches and rocks and things in ponds, and it was with a little bolt-action .22. And then as I got older, I was exposed to more powerful guns, and then ultimately, I've shot machine guns several times.
Have you shot an Uzi yourself?
Yes, I have.
And how hard is it really to handle? Because apparently she lost control of the gun when it was going off.
Well, it does have a propensity to pull up on you, and that's what happened here, is that it just rode up. And Uzis are known for that. That's one of the things that you have to be cognizant of when shooting an Uzi, is that it is going to definitely pull up the longer you hold the trigger. And that's why with this incident, if this instructor had loaded the full magazine in there, that was obviously, in hindsight, that's the wrong thing for him to do. There should have only been 3, 5, 6, 7 rounds in that.
No, but
that weapon.
You've held this weapon fired. Would you want a child, let's say 8, 9, 10 years old, firing an Uzi? Would you feel safe with that?
Well, like I said, it depends on the physical capacity of the child. I've got a friend of mine. He takes his children, who I believe are 9 and 12, to the range, and they are perfectly fine handling automatic weapons because they've got experience at it. They're strong enough to hold it. They're properly supervised, and they get a kick out of it.
Well, I can imagine, both figuratively and literally. What about BB guns? What happened to those? Didn't we used to just fire BB guns as kids?
Well, yeah, and you can have a BB gun unsupervised. That's the whole key to everything, is that where the legislatures have made what some would call a common sense regulation from going, instead of doing an outright ban of children with firearms, they said children can use firearms. They can't own them, obviously, but they can use firearms if they are under proper adult supervision.
And she certainly was in this case, this 9-year-old in Arizona. A very tragic, unfortunate accident. A 9-year-old girl firing an automatic Uzi, lost control of it, and the instructor there was killed. Edwin Walker, program attorney for U.S. Law Shield, the website uslawshield.com. Edwin, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for having me on our show. It was a pleasure.